Well, I don't know how you can make a mistake when there's only 610 bills. It happens all the time. It's just too hard to keep up with everything. I'm going to wait one more minute and then start. I know some people are probably having a hard time finding it. We had 40 sign up and we're at 17 right now.
Yeah, we were never sent the link. And
Yeah, as we were saying, it just said save to calendar. If you didn't save the calendar, then you didn't get the link.
Okay.
No, I got the link when you were RSVP. They sent the link in the response to everybody. That's how they got the link. And I did not save it to my calendar. I don't do that. And I had the link from that email.
Well, I just looked it up and I didn't, so I don't know what's going on.
So I think it has to do with how you have your Google account set up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says, thanks for registering. We will see you at the event. Here's the Zoom link. And all in one email from Sierra
Well,
Club.
that's unusual because every Zoom meeting I've been on has gone off perfectly without any hitches. I'm going to go ahead and start. We have 20 on. I want to respect people's time. I'm sure others will be joining us. My name is David Corbin. I'm the chair of the Legislative Committee. Al Davis is our lobbyist. And just to give a little introduction to what we do, as I said earlier, everyone wasn't on, but there's really been over 600 bills introduced this legislative session, and there's still carryovers from last one. So those are the first ones on the list that you should see there. But what happens is the legislative committee discusses them. Invariably, there will be somebody that sees something in a bill that somebody else didn't, and we might have to change. And as you can see, some of these things Al has already testified on because they already had the hearing. But the normal process is the legislative committee recommends to our executive committee, and then ultimately, not only do we just decide whether we support or oppose, but we decide whether it's a high, medium, or low priority. That meeting is Saturday. So everything you hear today is basically, it's not official, totally official with our stance, but it's pretty close, and it still will let you in on some of the things that we're watching. So Al is former state senator. He has been our lobbyist for several years now, and I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you, David. First of all, I have to apologize for my camera. I had a Zoom call earlier today, which was working, and the camera was working, but when I turned it on tonight, it was not. This has happened to me before. It sort of defaults back to something else. And I didn't want to start messing with it right before we were going to do this program. So you can just look at my still picture there. But so the first thing I wanted to talk about was some bills that I identified from last year that I am concerned about. And I did this morning, and as you probably know, the legislative calendar doesn't come out until the end of the day. So at the end of the day, ILB 541 is on the schedule, and that is a bill that Senator Lowe introduced. And what it does is it makes the boards of NPPD and OPPD partisan. So it's on the floor tomorrow. I think it's a very bad idea. We see how much partisanship is destroying the unicameral. And I can see the same thing happening at Public Power. And I say, you know, it's a business. It's not a it's not a political realm, so making it political is not a good idea. So I would urge all of you to contact your senators and other senators and ask them to oppose that, and it'll probably have to go to a filibuster to get there. So that's LB 541. LB 599 is a bill that Senator Armendariz put together last year. It deals with what they call advanced plastics recycling, which I had never heard of that. And so did some research with National Sierra Club on that. They think it's a very bad idea and that we should oppose that. So we did last year. The bill did not go anywhere, but it's still alive. I'm afraid it will probably come back this year. It's LB 509. LB 566 was most of you probably know that Senator Bostelman is not very friendly to renewable energy. And so he's done as many things as he possibly can to sort of throw monkey wrenches into the works. LB 566 was a bill that was put together last year, and it required a study to be done on intermittent renewable energy generation. So we opposed that last year, and if it comes up again this year, I would oppose that. And then LR21, which I didn't write a description of that down, but basically it's somewhat along the same line. Reliability. Senator Bosman doesn't believe that renewables have any future.
Well,
No, LR21, I'm sorry, LR21 is the nuclear study.
Yeah,
To study
Al,
small nuclear.
there's a question on chat. What are advanced plastics? Do you know the answer to that?
Well, when I talked about it, basically it's like, so many automotive vehicles today are plastic, in large part made of plastic. And so this is recycling those. The concern that was expressed to me by National was, if you don't have good, very good fans and very good screening, you're going to put a lot of pollutants into the atmosphere. And these are not especially good things to put into the air.
Yeah,
If
also
I could just
before, go ahead.
if I could jump in on advanced plastics, it's mostly greenwashing. It's not really recycling it at all. It's using plastics for incinerating it and using other things, claiming that it can be converted into fuel and things like that. There is some potential of using some of this properly, but most of it is a scam. So it's, as I said, a lot of it's greenwashing.
Thanks for
I'm
that.
sorry, I got here late, but I would assume that you mentioned that LB 541 is up on the floor.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And by the way, this is Ken Winston. He is also our community organizer for the Nebraska Sierra Club. And also I mentioned that if you don't already know, I put the link for the legislature there, and it's pretty easy. If you just type in the upper right-hand corner, the bill number where it asks for you to be able to read the entire bill if you desire. So you might want to write down some of these numbers, and if you want to read more about them, obviously in a session like this, we can just summarize things, but as we just did, we'll try to clarify things when people have questions. So if you put them in the chat, I'll try to make sure that we respond to them. Sorry, go ahead, Al.
So these are the bills that I flagged as important for us. You can see that the first two, 1020, 1076, and I reversed those right behind that. So that was a mistake that I made. But these are Senator Michaela Kavanaugh's bills, both of them. We happen to have her LA on the call, and she could probably explain them better than I could. If you want to do that, Margaret, would you like to do that?
I can quickly do that. One of the bills would have entities who have contracts with the state be subject to open records requests by state senators only, not to the public, but by state senators. And it would be only on items related to the contract. And the other one would have the boards of those entities be subject to, similar to an open meetings law. So anything to do again with the state contract, they would have to do in a public setting. and that's like their board. It's not their staff deciding the details. It's their governing body meeting. And she's doing both of those because of the executive agencies either refusing or charging tens of thousands of dollars for records requests that she has put in, and particularly HHS refusing to come before the HHS committee and do briefings on different programs. So they're snubbing the committee, and this is her way of trying to go around them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate that.
Sorry.
Any questions about that?
And if people want to, unmute themselves and ask, that's okay too.
So LB 1119 then is the next one on the list. That is a bill I testified on today. That's Senator Dungan's bill. He introduced a bill somewhat similar to this last year, which did not go through. And so this is a little bit of a simplified version of it, but basically what it does is prohibits a homeowners association from vetoing the installation of solar panels on someone's roof. There have been cases in Lincoln where there was a woman who put solar panels in and her HOA said nothing bad about it, but then they ordered her to take them off and it cost her $10,000 to do that. So I agree with Dungan. It's bad policy. These panels do so many things. They contribute to reduced greenhouse gases because we don't need to burn as many fossil fuels, and people can save money on their power bill. So it's time that we move forward. And then we had someone testify that I thought gave great testimony, and his testimony was about the number of jobs that are associated with the solar industry in the state. So I thought the bill was well received. That's 1119. LB 1184 is a tax credit bill, which I believe was introduced to bring some relief to people who are suffering from high nitrate levels in their water. So the bill gives a 50% tax credit to anybody who has a well that tests high in nitrates, and there are other things in the wells that can also trigger that. And then you will install the reverse osmosis piece and get a 50% tax credit on your taxes when you do that. And I believe that's Senator Bostar's bill. There'll be 1218.
I'll just add, Al, that there's a bill later on. This is trying to help people on the reverse end of it. There's also bills to try to decrease that from the front end, and so if you don't have as many nitrates in the water, then you don't have to worry about filtering it.
And that's another bill that Senator Michaela Cavanaugh is bringing in, is to deal with CAFOs and make sure that we're not contaminating the water table. So we'll call on you, Margaret, when we get to that one. So am I at 1218? Yes, and that's Senator Bostar's bill. That's a fairly complicated bill. Not complicated, it's lengthy. It assesses a fee on charging, puts in some limitations on what public power can do with regards to installing chargers. So there'll be limitations on the distance that the public power could put a charger in from a privately owned facility. I think this is probably a bill we should support, but I put it down as no opinion because I didn't know how the board would feel about it. Yes, EV charges.
Al, will that bill, right now, in Nebraska, charging stations can't charge on a kilowatt hour basis. They have to only do it on time, which that makes it difficult between level 2 and level 3 chargers. Will that get rid of that prohibition?
So I don't think so. I think the bill gives them the opportunity to charge 3 cents per kilowatt hour. So there's a figure in there. I could go look it up.
I hope they're
Does
gonna.
that, does that answer your question, Clyde?
Yeah, if they're allowing a charge per kilowatt hour, that sounds like they are eliminating that prohibition.
3.5 cents is what Jeannie Miller is saying.
Great. Okay, thank you.
LB 1234 is a weatherization funding bill from Senator Wayne. You know, we've supported these all the way along because it's good public policy. It's geared towards low-income people to try to help them winterize their home, and also, of course,
Wayne is a
summertime is hot.
Black senator from Omaha, you know.
Yes. LB 1250 provides a $250,000 to develop a bike share program with nonprofits. This is Senator John Kavanaugh's bill, and I wasn't, you know, the bill's called bike sharing, and I thought, well, what is bike sharing? So I assume that what that is these battery operated bikes that we see around town. Now, if anybody knows differently, let me know. But I
Right,
believe
it
that's
would
what this.
be like Heartland Bike Share in Omaha. Do you have a similar operation in Lincoln?
Yes,
We have the bikes here, but I don't know who operates them.
yeah,
Okay.
and the Heartland B cycle is not just Omaha, it's Council Bluffs, even Scottsbluff. So it's growing and growing for the bike share programs. I just wanted to back up a little on the 1, 2, 3, 4. The weatherization, you know, we're also, many of us probably on this Zoom meeting are part of either the state climate action plan or the Omaha climate action plan, or both. And so the part about low income weatherization, there is a lot of federal funds for that. This $2 million is something that could be used, in my opinion, to supplement anything from the Inflation Reduction Act. So it's things like this that need to be part of the climate action plan as well.
And the hearing on LB 1250 is on Monday, February 5th.
And that's the bike share bill.
Yes.
LB 1258 is Margaret. That's Michaela's bill, isn't it? You want to tell us a little bit more about that one? It's
Sure.
Margaret, first tell people what CAFOs are, because sometimes I've noticed that we have a meeting and they say, what the heck's a CAFO?
CAFO stands for Concentrated Animal Feeding Operation. So it's feedlots, well, it's any animal that's concentrated in big enough numbers. But it mostly refers to chickens, cattle, and pork.
Pigs.
Yeah, pigs. So what we did with this was Senator Kavanaugh's coming at it from the perspective of, she saw a map that overlaid high nitrates and youth pediatric cancer. And so she wanted to make that connection. This bill does not specifically do that, but after a lot of looking at what we could or couldn't do, we decided to take what's actually already in the regulations regarding CAFOs and put it in statute, because the agency isn't following the regulation. And we added a couple things, which was, if there's a CAFO in a high nitrate area, as determined by the NRDs that they do their management project, if they're in a high nitrate area, then they have to install monitoring wells. They have to actually do the monitoring and report the monitoring results back to NDEE and to the NRDs. Let me think if we did anything
Yeah.
else.
And that's Natural Resources District, if in case
Yeah.
everybody doesn't know, and NDEE is the
Department of Environment and Energy.
yes.
And the Department of Environment and Energy is a state agency, where the Natural Resources District is a separate elected board that does groundwater management, and NDEE does more monitoring of not groundwater, but surface water. And they used to work well together, but they don't anymore. So we were trying to improve upon the pollution from the CAFOs, and we took a baby step is what we think. We didn't do anything big. There's no violation penalties. It's mostly reporting to try and get a handle on what's actually happening. And it's both for someone who's asking for a construction permit for a new CAFO, and then it would also make current CAFOs that's in a high nitrate area go back and put the wells in if they don't already have them.
And there's a lot of high nitrate areas in the state.
So is the governor going to come and testify against this bill?
Probably.
I think I'll be testifying for it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. I'm really glad you're on board here.
Yes.
Okay, LB 1335 is a bill that I think is very problematic. You know, a year or two ago, the Supreme Court, ruled against basically some of the waters of the United States piece, for one thing. It's an example. So this bill was put forward by Senator Moser, who's the head of the Transportation Committee. And essentially, it talks about where roads are, where roads are going to be planned, or trails, and that it would exempt those from essentially monitoring. As you probably know, every time a road is put in, it cuts territory and regions for the creatures that live there. So I think it's a bad bill. Bruce McIntosh, I talked to him today about the bill too. We both agree that it's a bad one. We have all those tortoises in the sandhills who cross the road, and oftentimes are run over. So they need to have some protections.
Yeah, I should point out that a lot of states, they're working on ways for animals to get across roads, not saying the roads will take precedence over the animals, but that you work together.
Right. And then the other thing is, with the decision on the waters of the United States, before there always had to be wetland mitigation if there was a road or something that was going to cross a wetland. Well, that would go away as far as I can tell from the law.
And now it also includes political subdivisions. So NRDs would fall under that, along with the Department of Transportation. So it's not just Department of Transportation, it's all state agencies and political subdivisions.
Yeah, all state agencies, that's correct. Yeah,
yep.
That is. So I assume Audubon's going to oppose that, Mark?
Yes.
And if I could just jump in for just a second, I realize I haven't done extensive research on this, but I would be surprised if this would not fall afoul of the federal Endangered Species Act. I don't know how the state can suddenly say we're not going to enforce.
You're right on federal species, Ken, but there's some state listed species and some in need of conservation that would lose their protection, but are not protected under the federal law. But for the most part, bald eagles, things like that, would still be covered, American burying beetles, but other species would not.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, Mark. And I know there's lots of reasons why this is a bad bill, but we don't need to spend a lot of time on it.
So if you guys don't know who Mark Broman is, he was the head of the Environmental Trust for a number of years, and now he works for the Audubon Group here in Lincoln. and is a good guy. We are on 1342, aren't we? That is Senator Wayne's bill exempts electricity and natural gas from sales tax. So it should be helpful to the lower income folks.
And this
LB
the same time when
1360.
they're trying
Go
to
ahead.
add sales tax to everything else.
LB 1368 is an incentive bill by Senator Ibach to reduce nitrogen usage by rewarding farmers with per acre pay, which I know probably goes against a lot of people's feeling about it, but I think it might make some sense to support this bill. If you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar, as we all know. And so if you have a little bit of an incentive payment to try to manage your nitrogen load, I think people might be tempted to do that. And once they do, maybe they'll find they're not going to need as much nitrogen in the future. So I think that's a good bill.
Yeah, and the one thing that we probably need to pay attention to too is if this were to pass, how do they enforce it?
Yeah, there'll have to be some checks. They'll have to be able to probably have to bring in your records to show how much nitrogen you bought. And obviously part of it's going to be on the honor system, but it's $15 an acre. So people aren't going to get rich doing it. So it's more of a perk. And I think it's going to be maybe a trial program to see if it works. But it's a novel idea because we do have a real nitrogen problem in the state that really needs to be addressed. It's a serious one.
And I agree
And
with
this issue with the pediatric cancer is not, that should make everyone sit up and pay attention. Go ahead, Ken.
I guess I was just trying to agree with you, Al. Sorry for being so agreeable. But yeah, no, I think we need to look at incentives. Mandates everybody hates mandates. So if we can come up with incentives that will get farmers to reduce their nitrogen application, we need to at least think about it.
LB 1369 is John Kavanaugh's bill. It was put together. There's been a lot of discussion for years with the REAs about power and public and trying to put in some renewable energy on farms. And the REAs have been reluctant to do anything except what they've always done. So, some years ago, I think in 2014, we passed the 25 kW piece. And there were caps that were put in place, which were not designed to be caps, but were designed to be floors, but became what was known were caps in the minds of the REAs. So at least one REA agreed to work with
And
a
Al,
hog
tell them what an
producer.
REA is.
Okay, REAs are the Rural Electrification Associations, which date back to the 30s when we electrified the state. So they are usually either they're usually co-ops. In my part of the state and in the eastern part of the state, there's a different structure, but they all work together. So this is a pretty significant movement on the part of the REAs. So this is going to allow an individual who puts in a solar array on his property, and if it's all behind the meter, he's able to use it all himself. So the reason this is important is it increases their ability to use that up to 100 kW rather than 25. So that's a plus. But the other part of it is Norris is one example of this. So Norris, when they reached their cap, and they've been reluctant to support us all the way along, they insisted that the customer had to buy energy from them at retail price, and then any energy that the farmer produced on his place would be sold back to them at wholesale. So they're making money on the deal, and there's no incentive to put in an array if you have to pay retail price for your power. So what has happened there with this LB 1369 is we've got 100 kW exemption. Anything you use behind the meter, you can use at your own cost. And then what you sell to them, you have to sell for wholesale. So it's probably a good bill, and it will probably really change the industry across the state, because I think all the RAs will probably have to fall in line with this if it passes. Pork producers were the people who really got behind that, but we've been working on it for a couple of years. And last year we had a meeting in Omaha with all the solar producers, but we just couldn't get any movement. So I'm pleased that this is coming forward. Any questions about it? I noticed somebody had put a note up, but I didn't get to see that. So
It says for 1368, I would expect a person would need to bring in soil tests before and then records to show what was applied. That's how we did this, and with I don't know what the acronyms stand for, but EQIP and NRCS.
you might suggest that to Senator Kavanaugh. That would probably be good.
That's actually, I think she's commenting about the other bill on 1368.
Right.
Yes,
And that's Senator Ibach's bill, right?
I'm sorry. Yes. I'm sorry. Yes, that's right.
So yeah, I'm starting to be kibitzing. But yeah, I think that's a good suggestion.
yes.
Yeah, NRCS is Natural Resource Conservation Service, and EQIP is one of their programs. They put money out for land treatments, kind of like CRP, Conservation Reserve Program. EQIP, does programs for like dividing pastures up with cross fencing and alternative tanks and things like that, all kinds of habitat work. So that's a federal program under NRCS. That's USDA, U.S. Department of Ag.
I
Thank
think,
you.
And
Thank
for
you.
Environmental Quality Incentive Program.
I think I read in 1368 that they expect to do checks on it by every 2 years. Did you?
That's 1368, Sharon.
Yes,
Yes,
Thank you.
yeah, we went back to that because of the
I
chat.
know. I know.
No, I'm not telling you, I'm telling Al.
Yeah, got it. LB 1370 is another one of Bosselman's poison pill bills. So if a fossil fuel plant is going to be retired, it has to be replaced with another plant that is reliable, which obviously would shut out their perception of renewable energy. We have batteries that are coming along, which are going to really cause poor Bosselman trouble, because when the batteries are there, then they're going to have to be considered reliable. And most of you probably know that when OPPD had the outage last week, it was because the water intake at the coal plant was so frozen, and because of the drought, the water table's down. So, coal plants are not 100% reliable either, but Mr. Bosselman thinks so.
And I'll give my standard speech. No energy source is 100% reliable. Remember we had a nuclear plant that was down for 2 years. It depends on water levels, and it's not always the case, but the case recently here and in other states, the wind energy actually helped to keep the lights on, where that we would have probably had blackouts had that not happened.
And if I could just jump in, I think this is along with the next bill, this is one of the two worst bills that we're going to have to deal with this session. And this one is a major concern because I think there's 23 co-sponsors of the bill. So all they have to do would be get another one or two people to get 25 votes to pass it. Now, hopefully it couldn't overcome a filibuster, but dispatchable, it says that you have to replace, if you retire any dispatchable resources, you have to replace them with other dispatchable resources, which is just crazy. As David and Al said, it doesn't improve reliability. It would cause electric rates to skyrocket. It's interfering with local control. There's just a host of reasons. It's interfering with people with expertise, substituting the judgment of the legislature in place of people who work in the industry. And then, of course, probably the most key thing for us is the fact that we need to address climate change, and this would prevent any steps being taken to address climate change.
Yeah,
What
and
do what do the utilities think about that? Are they opposing this?
Oh, I'm sure they'll oppose it
Sure they
too.
will.
Well, I mean,
Essentially, what you've got is the legislature telling what to do.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that that's going to go down very well with the management. And, you know, Senator Boston's wife may have some knowledge about power, but I don't think any of the other co-signers are experts on it. So, you know, why are they chiming in?
Well, if the utilities are opposing it and all these other groups are opposing it, is there still a good chance it would go through?
You know, Mary, I'm going to talk about Senator Lowe's bill, the one that we talked about at the beginning of this meeting. So I looked at the committee statement on it, and I think there was one person who testified in the positive on it for themselves, and it was posed by everybody else, but here it is, a priority bill. And so you just never know.
yeah, I'm in agreement, Mary. I mean, this needs to be an all hands on deck kind of opposition. We can't take for granted. I mean, historically, if you had unanimous opposition to legislation, it wouldn't get out of committee. But we've had several bills like that where there was nobody that supported them. Bill still advanced, was still made into a priority bill, and most of them we managed to stop on the floor. But anyway. I would encourage people to look at this as legislation that we need to oppose all out. So,
And again,
Questions?
yes. Jason, you have a question? I would just point out too, that this again would be contrary to what is supposed to happen with the state climate action plan that will then become a an actual action plan instead of just a plan. It will actually have things to do, and this would be exactly opposite of what goals we're trying to make.
and one of the things that I always like to point out, well, I put together some talking points on LB 541, but we have very low electric rates in the state of Nebraska. This would blow that out of the water. It would not improve reliability. We already have some of the most reliable electric service in the country. It's just, this is all based on political talking points, nothing based on facts.
So now we'll move on to the next bad bill, which is 1375. This is another bill of Senator Lowe's, and it was introduced at the request of the governor. I'm agreeing with Ken on this. I think it's one of the worst bills that we're going to have to deal with, and for a number of reasons. It kind of short circuits the way planning is done for CAFOs. Basically, I think this is what this is all about. So it'll go to the planning committee, but they're not able to ask for input from other entities. I mean, they can ask for input, but they're not to consider federal rules or other rules. Their decision that they make is going to be based on Nebraska rules only. So the clock starts ticking, and if nothing is done in 90 days, the construction can go forward. If there's no vote taken, the assumption is that the project goes forward. So that's not good. A few years ago, when Heineman, I think, was governor then, or maybe it was the first year of Ricketts, but the Farm Bureau Group introduced a bill to basically kind of eliminate local zoning and make a matrix, and the matrix would be how everything was going to be done in the state. So I was one of the people that opposed that because I believe in local government, and local governments need to make decisions. And we were able to stop that, so it became a voluntary matrix. So I think this is just more of the same, that we need to harmonize everything across the state and kind of remove the ability of county board to make decisions about where CAFO is going to be located. So I think it's a bad bill. Ken, you want to talk a little bit about this when you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I do, and I know John Leo also wants to talk. Could folks who aren't talking, please mute their.
Yes, we have some interference with that.
Someone named Jason, can you please mute your computer or phone?
Anyway, yes, I definitely agree. One of the other things that, and as I said, I know John Leo also wants to make a comment, but one of the things it eliminates public hearings, or at least eliminates the requirement for public hearings. It may eliminate them completely, because I see it strikes the language saying hold public hearings. So it sounds like there will no longer be public hearings held by regarding by planning commissions, and it's specifically related to CAFOs. It says that they can't consider rules and regulations governing water quality, which seems like one of the main reasons why you'd want to one of the main concerns you'd have regarding a CAFO. So this is just bad on many levels, and I will cede the floor to Joe.
And Jonathan, you have a couple of comments?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So I think this is it is absolutely, and CAFO regulation is one of my specialties. And Ken is right, as is Al, that the specific, there's only one section though of this entire bill, subsection, frankly, of this entire bill that deals with CAFOs, that calls out CAFOs specifically. There's a much greater assault on the on the process for conditional use permit applications and evaluations and approvals by county planning commissions and county boards of supervisors, broadly speaking, including but not limited to CAFOs. For instance, what Al mentioned earlier, that the bill has a section that says that if action on a completed application has not been either approved or disapproved within 90 days, it becomes deemed approved as a matter of law. That is not limited to CAFOs. That's limited to any special use or conditional use permit by my reading of this bill. So it's a much broader assault on authorities beyond the local planning and zoning commission, and in certain cases, the county boards, to evaluate special use permits altogether. What makes, as Ken mentioned, what makes the CAFO language in this bill so bad is that it prohibits the planning commission or the county board from considering any rules or regulations other than its own in determining whether or not to approve or disapprove the conditional use permit for the CAFO. In other words, not just water quality rules of the state or natural resource districts, but any other kinds of land use considerations besides those that already exist in that particular county's planning and zoning regulations are off limits with respect to the consideration of any CAFO special use permit application. And again, finally, the prohibition on holding public hearings is in a section of the bill that is not limited to CAFOs. And it's, again, this, as I know, I think Ken may have said, this bill was introduced the day before the last, or just before the deadline for submitting legislation. It's badly written, it's confusing, but it seems to me that section 2 of the bill, because it doesn't limit itself to CAFOs, that's where the language that says it shall, the county zoning or board shall make preliminary reports on its finding and accept written public comment, but then the obligation to hold a public hearing is deleted from the legislation. And that is broad. Again, it's not just limited to CAFO. So I think it's an even greater reason why this is an all hands on deck opposition.
Yes, and by the way, this is the value of having these sessions. We always get people with different levels of expertise, and it's always good to hear from people who are watching the bills too. And I appreciate the comments. I want to point out that this is also being recorded, and so we will make it available for those that either would want to review some parts of it or want to let other people know about it. The other
David,
thing,
may I make one other, the next bill that's coming up, which I don't know, but which strikes a sensitive chord for me in the context of county zoning commission's consideration of CAFO special use permits, is that, as Ken knows, a particularly controversial large swine CAFO that was proposed for southeastern Gage County recently involving Summit Pork. I was involved with some other folks in helping citizens there to kill that application. It failed at the County Board of Supervisors in Gage County because the county board voted 3-3, effectively killing the permit application. The reason they voted 3-3 as opposed to 4-3 one way or the other is because the chair of the board recused himself from voting on the special use permit for the CAFO because he had a grading contract for that property if the CAFO were to be approved. And by doing that, he put them into a 3-3 vote. And it was just his choice to be open and out front about that. A lot of people knew about it, but I'm particularly interested in LB 859 to know how it increases the obligations on the part of appointed or local or elected officials at local governing bodies to submit conflict of interest statements in connection with particular kinds of activities, specifically conditional use permits, so that you flush out those kinds of personal conflict. I'm just drawing a connection between the two because it came up very prominently in that other incident.
thank you.
Thank you.
So there was a question about, is this an assault on the wind and solar? This would be the CAFO bill, was it 1375? I would say a wind and solar outfit could be just as happy as a CAFO if they were having trouble with the county board today and the planning commissions. So, they would fall under the same rules as the CAFO in terms of not having to have a public hearing. And if 9 days goes by, the wind project would go forward. As I read the bill.
And I agree with you, Al, which is why I think Brewer should oppose the bill.
So I'll hop in here. I talked with Lowe's staff and brought that up. I was a little surprised by that. And I think it's really, they got their marching orders from the governor and the governor got his marching orders from AFAN. So I don't think it is particularly designed thoughtfully with some of those other potential implications in mind. And that's something that is now being discussed by a variety of staff.
And Edison, tell us what that acronym is.
Oh, AFAN. Oh, gosh, what is?
Alliance for the future of agriculture in Nebraska. I believe it's Alliance for the future of agriculture in Nebraska.
Alliance for the future of agriculture in Nebraska. Yeah,
that's right.
So, yeah, it's definitely going to be, something that's going to be at the top of the list. But I think the biggest problem that the governor has is that he's set so many bills that he's requested. I think that the best opportunity is to just go and push up enough noise to prevent the speaker from scheduling them.
Yeah, and speaking of noise, that's what we hope that a lot of people will do. If you really have strong feelings about it, you can either testify in person or if I'm correct, that now it's just 8 a.m. the day of the hearing. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
And submit your comments. So if you click on that bill, then it'll say submit a comment, and that will allow you to do it if you can't appear in person. Obviously, you can call the offices too.
So one other thing about 1375, you know, there are about half a dozen counties that have no zoning at all.
Exactly. So that would mean that Platt, Butler, Cumming, um, and there's a couple out west, but they're mostly, it's kind of CAFO Alley up in north central Nebraska, where they already have a lot of CAFOs. This would really open up. There'd be no way of, I mean, basically it'd just be a free ride to, you apply, you're in.
I would think so. And you know, Jonathan, I like your opinion on that, but it looks to me like in a county where there's no zoning, you could plan to put a CAFO in, sit out the 90 days, and it would be right, you know, 500 feet from town.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm not even sure if you'd have to wait 90 days. I mean, the thing that I'm assuming is the case, and I don't know this, Al. I know there's a Nebraska, I believe, Supreme Court decision that says that you cannot enact, and no county can enact or enforce any land use or zoning regulation unless it has an approved comprehensive plan that creates the foundation for all zoning regulations. I don't know if those counties, if all the counties that don't have zoning regulations also don't have comprehensive plans. But if there's no comprehensive plan, and of course there can't be legal zoning regulations without one, then there arguably is no local legislative authority for how a county planning commission or county board, if it exists, probably there would only be a county board and not a county planning commission without without zoning regulations. But whatever that final local governmental agency is, they wouldn't even necessarily be bound by 90 days, I don't think. I need to read this language a little deeper, but yeah, at least they would be free to do that, and there would be no obligation to get any kind of input under those circumstances.
The other thing that could happen with that 90-day shot clock is that you could go and have a special permit submitted, and then the Planning and Zoning Commission and the county board could go and just sit on it, not do anything. It would be automatically approved, and they could just say, well, that's the legislature's fault, not our fault. We didn't.
And that's precisely right, Edison. What this does is it incentivizes delay and inaction on the part of a governing county agency with respect to all conditional use permits, because after 90 days, if they don't act, it's automatically approved.
Suffice it to say that this is one we should strongly oppose. And,
yep. Well, and all hands on deck opposition.
Yes.
All right, at 8:59, we kind of touched on that a little bit. That bill requires a conflict of interest statement for all local governing bodies. I think the bill, I'm not looking at it in front of me right now, but I think it's limited to cities at the present time. And now it would include all local political subdivisions. So I think it's a good bill.
Yeah, it just changes the language to say any political subdivision. Previously it said a city or person holding an elective office in a school district. I guess I'm not sure what, I guess it would also bring in NRDs perhaps. The one that it does continue to exempt is sanitary and improvement districts.
Right.
Which probably should be outlawed. But that's another story.
LB 866. It's the one time we're going to support Bostelman, I think. Essentially what they did was they changed some language with regard to conflict of interest. So someone who had served on a public power board had to sit off for a while before they could serve on the power review board. That is eliminated in this bill. And then there's an engineer, a slot for an engineer, I think, that's being added in the removing the attorney. The power review board has specific career people that have to be appointed to that. And then the other piece of it is it increases the stipends for the people who are employed by the power review board or board members. So the power review board is kind of the go-to entity for projects.
Actually, they kept the attorney, but they got rid of the accountant.
Got rid of the account.
Yeah. So,
And that's, they're government appointed,
right.
a governor, I mean.
Yes.
And
Right.
so we've been keeping a close watch on some of those, and we managed to keep one bad person out.
Yeah.
Well, a crazy person,
The
David.
crazy person, but not one of the other bad people.
Yes. Yes. And Lori, which bill were you referring to?
I think that was the question on
Yeah.
1370.
Yeah,
1375.
and I didn't phrase it right. I wondered how that would impact solar and wind, and you answered that. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.
883, is that the next one? 882. So when SNAP benefits are given out, apparently there's a card that goes with that, and there have been fees on that before. This waives the fees that go with that. When I first was looking at this bill, I was confusing it with another one. So it's probably a minor bill, but you know, the club has a traditionally sort of been tried to stand up for lower income people who are already stressed enough. And so I just included it in the list to support it. 888 and 889 are two bills appropriating funds to middle income housing and rural housing. I think it's 25 million for each of them. Senator Vargas, I believe, is that right?
Yes.
LB 956 provides for light mitigating technology on wind turbines. So you know, if you've been out in the country where wind turbines are, they've got the red light that blinks and blinks. So there are ways you can have those turned off if a plane has a radio and they can click the radio, it will energize the red lights. So this is a new thing, and it's not a new thing, but some of the very small airports in Nebraska have these on their landing strip. So a pilot can come in, he clicks his radio, the lights come on the landing strip, and he can land at night. So this will just effectively do the same thing with turbines, turning off the lights, which is one of the things that people complain about. LB 969 increases the floor for no bid contracts for public power districts. And it's a significant increase, and I should have gotten the figures for that. So a no bid contract basically is one of those in which you don't have to go out and get bids for it. And a lot of times for small amounts of money, it makes sense. But when you get into large dollars, I think it's foolish and bad policy. So I put down opposed on that one.
If I recall, for the larger ones, it was from $500,000 to $1 million. And that they don't have to go and get board approval if it's under $1 million.
And Gene looked that up, 250 to 750. Is that right, Gene?
Oh, 2 million.
Or is it Jeannie?
There you go. Thank you.
And what are PPDs?
Public power districts. You don't have the N or the O on there, so it doesn't look the same, but that's what it is.
Thank you.
1366 strengthens the right of property owners in eminent domain issues. This is Senator John Kavanaugh's bill. I think he's worked with Senator Brewer and some other people on it, so it may have a chance of going somewhere.
Yeah, if I could just briefly talk about what it does, because I've worked on it a bit, but it came out of a hearing that was held last fall that I was part of. There's 5 basic provisions of it. One is a requirement of good faith negotiations. The good faith is defined as an offer of at least fair market value and reasonable attempts to get the owner to accept it. Secondly, it requires an appraisal to be shared with the owner. Third, the condemner that is a political subdivision is required to have a majority vote approving condemnation of the land in the by approving in the place where the eminent domain is to take place. A private entity using eminent domain is not allowed to use eminent domain unless for pipelines there's approval by the Public Service Commission, or there's a majority vote of the governing body of the county, city, or village where the property is located.
It's the clock.
And then if the property is no longer used for public use, the person has the right to get the property back. So there are, because of the fact that Brewer and Boston have both signed on to it, it has a chance of going somewhere.
Thank you.
Question? There are no questions. We'll go on. LB 1245 allocates funds to work for removal of lead pipes in drinking water and for training for that purpose. Bruce McIntyre brought that bill to my attention today, or McIntosh.
Yeah, the people may already know that there's a lot of federal money for removing the lead pipes, specifically in parts of Omaha and Lincoln. And they're going to need a workforce to be able to do that. And it's, one concern, I don't think it's part of this bill, but a concern that we have is that landlords will say, no, I don't want you to come in and replace these pipes. So we'll work on that at some point too.
LB 1397 is kind of a weird bill. It's Senator Merman's bill. It removes the status of so land is categorized in Nebraska as residential, commercial, and agricultural. So this removes the ag status from land on which a wind or solar farm is located. But I'm not sure what it's going to be called. It's not going to be residential, and I'm not sure it's commercial. So I'm not sure what this land is going to be, how it's going to be categorized, but here's the issue with it. So if we have the turbines and the solar farms paying the nameplate capacity tax, and then we have the infrastructure that is built into the property that's paying personal property tax, and then we have the land, which can in many respects is still farmed if you have turbines, or if you have solar panels, you can run sheep underneath that. So it really has an ag purpose. And basically, I think the bill is just designed to make it harder for wind and solar to make it go of it, but it's not a good idea.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that agriculture and wind energy work okay in Iowa.
Right. And it's if farming is taking natural resources off the land, this is a natural resource, wind and solar, and so you should be able to. It's ag purpose. 952 is basically the legislature's counter to Governor Pillen's decision to not go for the $18 million in supplemental nutrition program funding for the summer kids. I think that's a bill I think everyone I've talked to said that was a big mistake on the governor's part. Even very conservative people think that was foolish. So I think the bill may have a chance of going somewhere, and a strong supporter of it. And the last one is LB 828. That's the Nebraska Apiary Act, Senator Blood's bill. Most of you probably have kept up to date on the issue with all the implant at Meade. And, that's where Judy Woosmar, who's the bee specialist at UNL, first discovered the death of her bees. So the Apiary Act is a bill that Carol introduced a year ago, and then there was a lot of flack with that. So now she's reintroduced it and tried to simplify it, make it more of a voluntary thing. one of the objectives is to try to get a handle on where the hives are located in Nebraska, and then to try to get some sort of a baseline on how many hives are failing every year because they're not surviving. I anticipate it will still have opposition. I've seen some opposition from some folks on Facebook. I think they don't understand the bill, but that doesn't never stop anybody from being suspicious of government.
Al, are
So
you
those are the
aware
ones
of
that I've
any,
identified.
are you aware of any
Pardon me?
principled opposition to the to LB 828?
Last year, it seemed like the beekeeper, there's a loose confederation of beekeepers from somewhere, and they were opposed to it because there was going to be a fee attached to it. You know, they view themselves as hobbyists, but what they should consider is we have to do some investigation to find out why we're losing these hives.
Yeah, and not only that, I mean, many other states have this and they have even more than this bill provides. But it also, those people who are raising bees and are making money off of it, many of them have already left the state, and we don't have any handle on where they are or why they left or anything like that. And so this would be a step towards that direction.
I think it's worth saying that, you know, Nebraska produces a lot of corn, and seed corn is covered with pesticides, which are neonics. They're death to pollinators. So we don't know if that's why the bee population is declining, but it's possibly one of the reasons.
Yeah, and if you've looked at, I mean, I've read a little bit about some books about bees, and there's some internal squabbles among people, you know, who raise bees on various, you know, wild ones versus domesticated ones and so on. But so you'll get a little bit of that, but it's mostly to know what's going on in the state. And of course, since they're pollinators and they're so important to the ecology, that's the reason for doing it.
I think there's also a little bit of discussion of people who are supportive of native bees. They don't want people going down the road with honeybees too far because they're a non-native species. They're really like almost like milk cows. They're an agricultural producer that produces honey. And the native bees are much more important, but we have to protect all bees. And so anything that we help honeybees helps protect some of the native bees. But there is a lot of discussion between native bee people and beekeepers and these harvested bees, which really are almost like raising chickens.
Yep.
I think I just read somewhere that there's a potential bee who might be placed on the endangered species list, maybe from the
Yes.
Great Plains.
Yeah, the big bumblebee. Yep, it's one of 3 species being proposed right now.
Yeah, and Claudia asked if there was a bill of pollinator task force, and Ken answered that that's the one we're talking about now.
That's what's going to, this is the bill, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, so I want to thank you all for being an attentive group and with a lot of great input. We appreciate that very much. And if you got other ones that you think are important, let me know because I may have
yes.
missed them.
David, do we have
I've got a
time to
couple.
go back to one for a question?
Go ahead.
On the bill 956 for light mitigating tech on wind turbines, I just looked up ADLS, which is the only technology that has been approved by FAA, and it was developed to limit light pollution. So Mark, maybe you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what that means to me is that the default is that the lights are off and they only come on when a plane is detected in the area. That's great for
Yes.
pilots, but it's really bad for birds.
Well, there's not a lot of research on the lights and how much it protects bird strikes, you know, the flashing lights, because it flashes just on the top of the tower, not on the end of the blades. So it probably
Oh.
helps a little bit, but the bats are getting, you know, wiped out by the blades and the pressure being created by the large blades, and birds are striking the outer blades, usually way out on the edges because they see the
Okay.
tower, but not the blade.
I see. Okay. So that's different from the like ultraviolet lights that we're putting on power lines, in that it's not
Right.
where it needs to be in order.
Right. Yeah,
for
they
that
have two
light.
kinds of lights on solar or on the wind turbines right now. One is a strobe
Okay.
light, kind of a white blinking obnoxious light, and the other one's a red blinking light. And so
Okay.
they're just on the tower themselves, and that's mostly for aircraft. But it does help a little bit with birds, but not a huge amount.
Okay, got it. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that.
And just to reiterate what Al said, thanks for all of your interest. Again, we'll finalize all of our official stands on these on Saturday with the executive committee. But feel free, as Al said, if we miss something or if you think we're misinterpreting something, to let us know. And because that's always a possibility. Also keep in mind that sometimes things come up and people add things to bills, and something that we supported might then be opposed and vice versa. So that's one reason why we have to stay on our toes, and why we have Al there as our lobbyist watching all of these things. And then finally, I'll just say that our next Thursday, fourth Thursday of the month, will be a presentation by Omaha Public Power District's Vice President for Environment and Sustainability, Cliff Fleener. So if you have questions about what you think, well, some of them might be pertaining to the bills we talked about, but also, how did they make it through this? What kinds of things are they planning? And since he's their environment and sustainability person, what are they doing? Maybe how are they involved with the climate action plan and so on?
So David,
Dave, I've got a couple bills. If you don't mind, I'll throw out just for people's knowledge, if you got just a second.
Yep.
One of them I wanted to mention was 1219, Senator Kavanaugh's bill. It upgrades building and energy codes. Of course, that's important to climate change, but that's 1219. Another one is 1243, Senator McDonald. It adopts the Wildland and Fire Response Act. That's dealing with fires and prescribed burns. Of course, prescribed burns are very good for habitat. So we're always using prescribed burns on the landscape is something important. And so we keep a real close eye on those. Let's see, 461 allows ag producers to set electrical systems up and use them on site without having to go through the REA. I think you'll remember John Hanson mentioned that at our weekly meeting the other day. But that's a bill that allows ag producers to put up solar panels, and they don't have to jump through hoops with the REA because they're not set up to go into the REA system. They're used on site. And then a couple of bills left over from last year, they're hanging out there. 218 increases vegetation removal in streams. It's going to increase it from $3 million to $6 million a year. Now, some vegetation removal is good in streams and rivers, but sometimes they go a little bit overboard. What they're doing is trying to get the water to flow faster to prevent flooding and backwater, but that also takes a lot of good habitat out. So we always keep a close eye on those habitat disturbances in rivers and streams. And I know George Cunningham is always very worried about those bills. So that's 218 that's left over from last year. 655 gives money to work again with set up 2 statewide firefighting crews for wildfires and prescribed burns. So it kind of puts some insurance out there on the landscape, some help in that field. So we're watching that one. LB 662 restricts filing of public nuisances against agricultural operators. So that's one we got to keep an eye on. It basically gives a lot of agricultural producers a pass on these CAFOs, these confined animal feedlots and things like that for noise and air pollution and smells and things like that. So we got to keep an eye on 662 because it really is trying to give them an advantage over neighbors. And then the last one I'll mention is LB 576, and that's to limit liability on land management burns. That's in Judiciary Committee and it's stuck there from last year. And of course, the attorneys do not like anything that reduces liability. I think it's a good bill, but the lawyers have got it, tied up in that Judiciary Committee right now. I don't think it's going anywhere, but that's LB 576. But it would be good because it would allow the groups like Nature Conservancy, ours, Game and Parks, all those different groups to do more prescribed burns on the landscape. So I appreciate the opportunity to throw those out, Dave.
Yeah, thanks. We'll take a look at those. I should point out, one other thing is that since there are so many bills, sometimes hearings are going on at the same time. And, so it's always nice if we can get other people to testify, because Al can't be at two places at the same time, and to have people write in. And so sometimes we don't get a lot of lead time on the hearings and so forth. So anything that people can do to call, to comment, will be helpful. We can't really put 100% energy into this many bills. There's no way. And that's why we have to establish a priority. And Mary, I think you wanted to say something?
Yeah, David, I wanted to say the plan then too for Sierra Club is to send out legislative alerts on some of those key bills, especially those all hands on deck kind of bills that we will be sending to everyone on our list, and everyone who's registered for this tonight's program would also be getting some of those legislative alerts. Is that correct?
Yes. And if you're not on our newsletter list, if you didn't receive a newsletter from us just recently and you want to be on it, let us know.
Dave, there's
Mark,
also
can
one
I
other one.
jump
I
in
don't
and
have the
ask-
number. Maybe one of the other folks know, whether it's Al or maybe Ken, but there's a bill that's sweeping all of the cash funds out of a lot of different agencies. And there are 3 cash funds at Game and Parks that'll be impacted. One on state parks, one on Habitat, and I can't recall the third. But it basically is taking all that cash and sweeping it out. The governor's doing that with one of the appropriation bills, but that's very dangerous. You know, Game and Parks set aside money like in the Habitat or the state parks for things to come in the future, and now they're just taking the money away. So they've been very good and judicious with their money. Now they're taking their savings account. So it's pretty silly, but it happens every once in a while. And this is a very large bill sweeping a lot of accounts, and also in the Department of Natural Resources. So there's a lot of money that's going to be taken and probably go to tax relief, property tax relief, I'm guessing.
And what's that number?
I don't have it in front of me. I meant to write that down. Maybe Ken or
It was
Al
one of the
know.
last bills introduced. And I looked at it, but I didn't have time to go through it all because it's a repealer language, basically the whole
Yep.
thing.
Yeah, it sweeps a
Mark,
lot of
one
accounts of
question for you.
HHS and lots of places. Yep.
You said LB 461. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's not the bill. I just looked up L4. That's not what you described. Mark.
Pardon me, Ken?
Yeah, I agree, Al. That I'm not sure what bill Mark's talking about because
So it should be another number.
yeah,
Mark,
You said ag producers set up on site. That's what I wrote down.
On which, let's see, which one?
461.
1461?
1461. Okay.
Yeah,
14.
1461 is on the solar panels, allowing ag
Yeah.
producers to put up solar panels without having to go through the REA. They can, as long as they're using the energy on site.
Okay.
That's the one that John Hansen mentioned the other day at the energy meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I just put 461. Sorry.
Yeah, the
no,
1461.
there isn't a 1461.
Say again.
There is no 1461. 1417 is the last bill.
Okay.
So
Maybe
it
it's
might be
1401. I'll have to look that up.
So anyway, I think 1417 is the bill that you're concerned about. It eliminates fees and transfers and
It's all repealer language, Ken, if you're looking at it.
yeah.
Okay, well, we'll
That's not 1417. 1417 gets rid of a bunch of boards and commissions. And by the way, it gets rid of the climate assessment response.
Right, yeah, I was just noticing that. Okay, 1413 maybe? Transferring
we'll
funds.
figure it out. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
figure
There were two bills. One was all repealer language, and the other one was just a little different. I can find them. I know where they are
and we'll
on my list.
find it. And I don't want to take people's time. I'd say
No,
one last comment, unless somebody else wants to add after this, but a good way is there's several in here, many that we support. And it's not just all playing defense and going against bad bills, but supporting things that could help. Any comments from anybody?
David, someone has just asked about making the list available of bills.
Yes.
And I know we're going to have the recording of this program available through our website, right? Will
When
there
the executive committee meets and then establishes those priorities, it will be on our website under legislation.
and also the link for this recorded meeting will also be on our website?
Yes. Well, yeah, I'll put it, it'll be on our website, but it'll also be on, in a newsletter coming up too. But if you don't know, our website is sierraclub.org/Nebraska. All right, well,
I
thank
want
you.
to
everybody.
thank you, David. Thank Margaret and Ken and Edison and Jonathan and anybody else who had input and ideas here for this, because that's what makes it work. So I appreciate the help and the advice. And Mark, if you figure out your other bill, let me know and I'll get it on the list.
Yeah, I'll find those two. The one where they take sweep the funds, and then also on the John Hanson's one on the solar power on farm.
You're sure that's not the one that I talked about?
Yeah, I think that's 1369.
Is it 1369?
Yeah, where they don't have, where it's all behind the meter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
everybody.
all.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.
Right.
Right.
Thanks.